All right, everybody, here's the one a lot of you have been waiting for. The company straight out of the middle of nowhere, northern Vermont, St Johnsbury Trucking. All right, guys, this was a pretty fun one to do. I got pretty much all the information, and a lot of it. I didn't even do all the stuff about St. Johnsbury, that was in here. But there was an article that was written in 2015, then it was updated again in 2022, and I got all the information I needed out of it. It was written by Katie Moritz. I can't even read my own spelling. May 1st, 2015, from the North Star Monthly. And down in the description, I'm going to put a link for it, because I'm going to tell you about the company. But this was a really, really long article. It was really great. And they talk with former employees and even a former vice president of technology, things like that. They have all kinds of great interviews in it. So, yeah, after you watch this video, you're definitely going to want to click on that link. But a lot of people have asked for this, including my friend Frank from Queens. Frank worked for St. Johnsbury and later on for Roadway. And so he's been through the, the unfortunate companies going under a few times in his life. So we'll start out. St. Johnsbury Trucking was started in, obviously, St. Johnsbury, Vermont, which is way up north. Started in 1921 by Harry and Mickey Zabarsky. And the Zabarskys were sons of Russian Jewish immigrants. Also in that article, it talks a lot about what Jewish communities did in Vermont. You know, a lot of them were peddlers and ended up in trucking because of it. But basically, the company started, one truck, just like so many, and grew from there. In November of 1927, there was a horrible flood in the Northeast. It would knock out miles of railroads. It knocked out a whole bunch of bridges. I think they said 1,200 bridges were knocked out. It was knocking out roadways, everything. So basically, all these little towns up there were isolated. And the Zabarskys decided to use this to their advantage because they knew all the back roads in that area. They were asked to deliver some mail from St. Johnsbury up to Newport, which is way up at the Canadian border there. Apparently, it's 46 miles. So they set out to do this. It took them 26 hours to go that 46 miles, with Harry driving the truck and Mickey on the hood. It said he was on the hood with a long pole to prod at the ground to make sure that they were staying on stable ground, obviously moving at about 2 miles an hour. Wow, stay at 2 miles an hour, their ELD wouldn't kick on. Anyway, so years later, in the 1940s, they built their original terminal. Did I miss something? Oh, no, I didn't miss it. Okay. It just says that later, after that flood, people knew how well, how well determined they were and would get the job done. And they later started hauling butter from local creameries down to Boston. But they built their original terminal in the 1940s in St. Johnsbury, and it's still there. Right now, it houses the White Market, which is a family-owned grocery store chain. I did look at it on Google Maps and stuff, and it just looks like a grocery store. I was hoping there would be some kind of signs of the old trucking company. That article says that somewhere there's a logo still on the building, but I could not find it from any Google Map pictures or anything. So, anyway, so in the 1930s, during the Depression, they almost went bankrupt due to a dishonest employee. One dishonest employee's bad bookkeeping. Basically, he was cooking the books to make it look like everything was on the up and up when they weren't. And all of a sudden, they started getting a whole bunch of checks bounce coming back. They ended up $90,000 in debt. Obviously, a whole bunch of other stuff's going on. You know, you got the Depression. Now you got this going on. Plus, you had the, regulation was starting. When the government, the ICC, was regulating everything all at the same time. So it was at this time that the Zabarskys decided to divide and conquer. And pretty interesting what they did, and that it worked. So the plan to divide and conquer. Harry stayed in St Johnsbury and ran the administrative part of the business. That's where the administrative part of the business stayed. But they changed their headquarters, and Mickey and his family moved to Holliston, Mass, to start a new headquarters. So because they were now located just outside of Boston, the business grew. They were obviously in a much, much larger metropolis. But at this time, just like so many other companies of the time, you really could not expand. So all of their growth really came from acquisitions. While they're growing, they managed to pay off all that debt that they had the $90,000 in debt. It took them 3 years to pay it off. Through these acquisitions and expanding their business, the trucks got bigger. Says their trailers went from 14 feet at that, in the 30s, their longest trailer was 14 feet to 40 feet. And max weight of their trucks went from 40,000 pounds to 73,000 pounds over all this. So it actually says by 1966, the company moved 1 million pieces of freight a week. The other interesting part about that was they said that each piece of that freight was touched 6 times, they said. So basically they moved it 6 times. I guess that would go like pick up delivery into their warehouse, to here, back to the truck, off the truck. So actually they were one of the first companies in the 1970s to actually be totally computerized. They actually had a whole technology department, and including a vice president of technology, that set up and made them all computerized, which is expensive, and computers were huge back then. So pretty interesting. They were one of the first to do that. Another thing that's pretty interesting, I don't know when they started going to New York City. Frank is from New York City, and so I believe you worked for him out in New York City. So, but in the 1960s, Harry Zabarsky explained that they do not go to New York City. They would not bump docks in New York City, and the reason was corruption. There was so much corruption in New York City that you would have to pay bribes in order to do business, and he required to do it. It says he instead dropped off freight at other companies and let them go in and deal with it. Companies that already had New York City. He would not pay bribes. And he said St. Johnsbury believed in integrity, moral compass, and a strong work ethic. And they would not break these beliefs. Pretty interesting there. So in 1975, the Zabarskys sold the company to Sun Oil Company. That company is now known as Sunoco. They used the name of Sun Carriers, and basically they were trying to diversify their business. Add other businesses to them. They bought 3 other carriers: Mellon Trucking for the Northwest, Jones Trucking for the South, and Standard Trucking. And it didn't really say where their spot was. Apparently these companies worked out well for a while. But in 1986, Sun Oil decided to focus on energy. It just says that they were focusing on energy. It makes me wonder if it was deregulation. These companies were, they were going through, the deregulation happened. They were losing money, I would imagine. And I would imagine that's probably a big part of why Sun Oil decided to get out of that business. At that time, they sold the company to a group of investment lawyers in Los Angeles. And this was the downfall of the company. This group of investors purchased this as a leveraged buyout, which apparently was a big thing in the 80s. Basically, they don't have to put up much money, but they're taking the full debt of the company, or the full amount as debt, and using the company's assets as collateral. And they did that But they continued to add debt to the companies. They continued piling on debt. Now remember, these are companies that were surviving regulation, and now it was deregulation. So it didn't say if these investment lawyers were piling on debt to use other companies or if they were just trying to keep this in business. But it wasn't very long until Mellon went bankrupt, and then Jones, and then Standard. St. Johnsbury held on, but not for long. Yeah. So, in June 14th of 1993, they closed their doors after a $3.4 million loss in 1992. I understand that right before that, the contract, the Teamsters contract, they had agreed to give up, I believe, 9% of the pay, it said. And they were trying to work with Teamsters to cut other costs. There was a lot of concessions that the employees were willing to make, and just when looking at the books, apparently there was no way. Even if they had made these concessions, they were going to cut health care, they were going to cut, retirement pension benefits, not cut it all together, but they were going to lower it. And apparently the employees were willing to do it, but it just wasn't going to work, apparently. At the time, Ron Kerr was the president of the International Brothers of Teamsters, and he said it's another case where workers cannot save a company from management's mistakes and 12 years of deregulation. What does that sound like? You know what I mean? It's pretty much the same comments that Sean O'Brien has just made about Yellow, that for years they haven't been able to take care of themselves. The company hasn't been able to. There's lots of speculation after this, and I read a lot of the different speculation, and they said, why wasn't this company sold as a whole? And it actually turns out that it looks like the company was, just like Yellow, worth more dead than alive. It actually said that a lot of the properties that they had bought over the years, the areas, obviously Hollis and, Mass, the properties were worth millions now. So they actually were worth more, dead than alive. But unfortunately, just like when these situations happen, 4,400 people lost their jobs. And it just seems like a shame. It's another story of a company that was started by good, hardworking people, had good, hardworking employees, and eventually, through being sold, went under. And of course, deregulation didn't help anything with these companies that were used to working under the regulation. So, Harry Zabarsky never did see his company go under. He didn't live to that. He actually died in 1982 at the age of 83. His brother Mickey was 8 years younger than him, and he died in 1995. So he was around for the, for the fall of St. Johnsbury. He was 88 years old when he died. And yep, another great company gone. Hats off to the Zabarskys. I like to salute the great men and women of trucking, and the Zabarskys seem to be one of those families. Again, I encourage you to click that link below, because the story is so much bigger than what I've told, as far as the interviews with employees, everything else. North Star Monthly, and like I said, it was written in 2015, but it was updated in 2022. So, thanks as always, Frank. I hope I did good for you, and yeah, thanks as always. Comment below. Love reading the comments, and yeah, we'll catch you on the next one.